In this video, I'll be talking about the 21 most common costly compliance mistakes both landlords and agents are making. So make sure you watch this video to the end, as I'm going to take you through 21 of the most common costly mistakes that we see both landlords and agents make just because their properties look nice, as they may be new builds or recently refurbished, or they think that they are being compliant. So when we talk about compliance mistakes, most landlords and agents get the picture of something drastic: a genuinely neglected property, an obviously bad operator. That's not what we actually see most often. The mistakes that catch people out are usually small, easy to miss, and made by landlords and agents who are otherwise doing a perfectly reasonable job. Most of them start life as a perfectly reasonable sounding thought, which is exactly what makes them dangerous. So the common costly mistakes is this. Mistake number one: I've got an agent, that's their job, not mine. It's landlord's property, so it's a landlord's problem. So this is the single most common costly mistake we see, and it runs in both directions. Landlords say that about their agents, and agents say right back about their landlords. Both are wrong and both are exposed. The legal duty to keep a property free from Category 1 and Category 2 hazards cannot be transferred simply by signing a management agreement. A landlord doesn't stop being legally responsible just because an agent is managing the property, and an agent doesn't stand back and say it's not my property, and because agents also carry a fiduciary duty inside the management chain, and that duty exists independently of who holds the title deeds. So since the 27th of December 25, this mistake has become far more dangerous. Local authorities now have enhanced investigative powers to obtain evidence, including tenancy records, communications, financial information such as bank statements from landlords and agents, and relevant third parties that also have powers to enter business premises and also residential premises to gather that evidence. This matters because financial documentary evidence doesn't just show who was named on paper, it shows who actually made the decisions, who approved or declined repair spent, who received the repair reports, who had the money and the authority to act, and who chose not to. That's what local authorities are now able to establish, and that's how they determine who is liable and how much liability each party carries. So the result is that enforcement is no longer landing on whichever side seems easiest to blame. We're already seeing cases where both landlords and the letting agent are investigated and fined right from the same property, the same failure, the same set of facts. If your working assumption is this is not my responsibility, you need to know exactly why that assumption is no longer stands before an enforcement officer tests it for you. Mistake number two: I've got my gas set, EPC set, electric set, and right to rent checks done. Right, so you've got all the documentation, so you think you're covered. Here's a problem with that sentence. Under the Renters' Right Act, there are roughly 170, sorry, not the Renters' Right Act, I apologise, the National Residential Landlords Association, right, on their website state that there are approximately 168 individual compliance checks that a landlord or an agent need to be meeting. So drawn from that, right, there's 18 different legal frameworks, right, that local authority enforcement officers can draw upon when they enter your business premises, right? So not business premises, from your residential premises or your property, right? And they know already that you haven't got a Category 1 or Category 2 risk assessment survey done, and so they know that your property is carrying, right, especially if it's more than 10 years old, it's most likely carrying these risk hazards, right, because you're not even aware of it. Right? So having the certificates, where people think, okay, that this is enough. No, it's not. So the hazard. Right, so if there's no right, so it's very easy to have hazards inside your property. Okay, so now mistake number three: repairs are action but never recorded. So picture this: tenant report stamp in the bathroom in March. You send someone round, they fix it, job done. No photos, no invoice kept, no note on file. 8 months later, the tenant is in dispute with you over something unrelated, and they tell the council that the damp was never fixed and they've been living with their mould since March. right? You know that's not true, but you can't prove it. Right, it isn't, right? As far as the enforcement officer is concerned, if there's no record, the repair didn't happen. You did the work, you're still exposed because the burden is on you to prove it and not the tenant to disprove it. Mistake number 4, I've been doing this for years, so I don't need training. Years of experience teaches you how enforcement used to work. But in fact, enforcement, they weren't able to enforce, right? It doesn't teach you what changed on 27th December 25. It doesn't teach you the judgment calls that trained assessors, right, make, right, and self-taught landlords miss. Here's one concrete one. A trained eye can tell you, right? So you're not building surveyors, you're not housing inspectors. Housing, right? So therefore, right, a housing inspector, right? So the way they look at things, right? So the way you look at things are different. So a specific defect is heading for whether it's heading for an improvement notice or not. So we, right, a trained eye, so we can tell you whether a specific defect is heading for an improvement notice or heading straight for a fine. That's not guesswork. It's not a distinction. It's a distinction that officers are trained to draw. It's exactly the distinction untrained landlords and agents get wrong, because I've always just fixed it. And when they mentioned it isn't a system, it's a habit, right? So again, the other reason thinking that I've been doing this for years, I don't need training. Your tenants are being coached, right, by no-win, no-fee solicitors, right, sharks, and disrepair claims sharks. Right. They are being coached and they've been educated. Citizen Advice Bureau, Temporary Emergency Accommodation Departments, right, whatever, right, So there's so many, right, soon the Landlords Ombudsman, right. So there's so many different people, and plus now AI, right, and plus other friends and other people, right, social media, right. So it's so easy for them. So they know what your obligations are as a landlord agent, but you don't. So now, right, so this is raising. Right, this is why you've got lots of tenants now, which are kind of now, they're coming out the woodworks with Section 21 gone. Right, they're coming out the woodworks, right, and they are making claims, right, and so this is on the rise because now they find out in a cost of living crisis. Think about it. If you can get rent repayment orders 24 months, if you can get claims for disrepair things, like if your property's not looking decent or whatever, in that way, and that way, so would you turn it down? So mistake number 5, I've got a legal team head office and I don't need a risk assessment. Head office can hold your compliance policy. It cannot stand inside your property, right, during an inspection, right? So basically, right, see, if you got your head office, right, and you got a legal team and that, how can they defend you against fines and penalties in that of like category 1 for category 1 and category 2 hazards? They're not trained. They don't know where your risks are. They do not know. And plus the other thing is how category 2 hazards can become a category 1 hazard over a period of time. So this is massive. So again, the fact that this language that I'm using is going above your head, right, and you don't understand this, that in itself is where your risks kind of lie. You need to know this because this is what you'll be fined against, and an incident does not have to take place. Right, and a tenant does not have to have to be injured or any harm come to them in order for you to get fined, right? And that way, and so what we're kind of saying before, they didn't have the powers, right? The powers, they didn't have the investigation powers, they didn't have the resources, right? And they didn't have a duty. Now the government's placed a new duty on local authority enforcement teams, right? So this is what landlords are not understanding and agents are not understanding, and they're coming after both. They're coming after both landlords and agents, right? And so the thing is that focusing on this is what the Renters' Right Act states. But under the 18 legal different frameworks, right, did you know that each local authority, right, can have its own enforcement policies, what they're prioritizing, set their own policies, right? That. So do you know what your enforcement, right, does your head office, does your agent, or do you know what the enforcement policies are? No, they don't. Right, we make it our business to keep it on that because of our relationship with 180 local authorities that we worked in the past, and there's approximately 80 that we work with on a regular basis, right? So we make it our business to know of that, and enforcement policies. So once you kind of got there, so there's no law stopping, right? And so we're hearing that some local authorities, right? So what their policies are that they're going to be entering into. By going into the local letting agents, they know that you're an easy target. Why? because they know of multiple properties, right? That you will have. They'll definitely find, right? Overcrowding there. There'll be category 1 and category 2 hazards, right? Over multiple properties, because you don't know. You've never had a risk assessment survey done. Right. And when you look at category 2 hazard, it says initial or minor. What does initial or minor mean? First time or small offences. So things like cracked tile, not having IP rated lights, not having a window restrictor, right? Carpet coming away, right? Handrails not being long enough, right? Whatever, right? So it's what the officer is telling to discretion, what they think is a hazard. Not what you think. You may overlook and go past this. And also something, right, may not be a hazard at the time. Like, for example, at the time, like when they're looking at cold or whatever, right, so you may be thinking, right, I've got double glazing or all of this and that, right, but if you've got EPC rating D or whatever that. So when that EPC rating was done, right, that was done in the summertime. Whatever. Now watch this. Right. So I've seen officers. So when they kind of come up there, when you go there, right, in the winter, in the summer, right, everything is kind of fine. Now one of the category 1 hazard is excess cold or excess heat, right? So when you come back, if you come back in the winter, so in the winter, right, because you've got a draft through the door, that draft through the front door, right, which is a weather shield, can quite easily make that correct, yeah, right? So all of a sudden the tenant starts complaining, right? So very minor things like the wind's coming through the front door, spreading to the rest of the house, right? The draft's coming through there, right, making it cold. That's when they start investigating this, and if they call upon the local authorities, right, and that way, or enforcement officer, oh look, my landlord's not going to do this, it's really cold in here. Now that they know their rights or whatever, right, so if this changes things massively, right, then they start looking at the thermostat, start looking at everything, and now, while they're in there, they came for one thing. Now, do you think it's just that one thing? They're going to do a risk assessment of the whole property. Now that they've got a new duty, so they come for one thing, they've got a new duty, and because they can raise revenue for that, so what do you think is going to happen? Do you know it's so easy, right, for category 2 hazard? It's discretionary, it's small or minor, so it doesn't have to be anything serious. I'm seeing, right, where they are finding. Right, they're finding, and you'll be able to see this on the internet as well. Right, they're finding landlords and agents, right, for not boarding up, right, not having a cupboard, right, of the gas meter or the electric meter. Right, so your head office, right, and your legal team, they cannot protect you from that. These are civil penalties. How do you do that? They don't know where your risks lie inside your properties. They're not trained, right, housing inspectors. We receive the same training as them. Right. Then another mistake, I've got good tenants, I've never had a problem. With section 21 gone, this one's flipping fast. Tenants who used to stay quiet because complaining risk getting evicted doesn't have that fear anymore. We've seen tenants come forward now, right, who sat on issue for years. They come out of the woodworks, right, so and they're not doing it alone. So you've got no free solicitor sharks, I call them solicitor sharks. Because the way, right, they're going out there, right, are actually coaching them. Tenants on, right, and so it's not just them. You've got all of a sudden, right, you look over on social media, disrepair claims companies, they are coaching tenants on disrepair and compensation claims. Some tenants are exaggerating and some are outright lying because they know landlords don't keep records. They know that landlords have not done a category 1 and category 2 risk assessment, right, survey done. And so there's nothing to contradict them. So that's his uncomfortable truth. If a tenant could get 2 years of rent handed back to them right now in a cost of living crisis, how many are turning that down out of loyalty to you? A good tenant history doesn't protect you. It just means that nobody tested you yet. Right, common costly mistake, right, number 7, it's just been refurbished, it looks fine. So 2 examples of both, and I'm going to give you 2 examples, both are real. In fact, I've already given you the cold one, right, okay, so I've already done that one, right, so let's look at the second one. An inspector walks into a freshly refurbished room and sees an extension lead running across the floor. Why? Not enough sockets, right? Officers expect adequate double sockets at each corner of the room where people actually use appliances. And if it's not there, multiple extensions can become a fire risk. Refurbished ones are not. New paint, new carpet, don't fix an electrical layer, right? That was never brought up to standard. And this is just one example. There's numerous examples. So there's 29 hazards, 29 risk hazards. And so there's loads within them. Right, which then they could become category 2, which they're not a category 1 mandatory yet, but they will become mandatory later on. So this ain't small, This is massive, and this is why you need to be educated, right? That's why you need to also know, right? Like, you get a risk assessment, risk category 1, category 2 risk assessment, so we're done, right? So now mistake number 3, missing that risk changes with occupancy. A property assessed as fine for a single professional tenant isn't automatically fine for a family that moves in next. More people, more activity, more wear, and potentially different space and overcrowding considerations. The property didn't change. Who's living in it did, and that resets the risk picture. Right? So mistake number 9. I've done my own research online. I've read up on it. Right? So general reading finds you the obvious stuff. Damp and exposed wire, broken banister. It won't systematically walk you through 178 checks across 18 legal frameworks. The hazards that actually catch people out by definition, the ones that don't announce themselves to someone as skimming articles, right? And plus, now, again, while the law is national, I keep saying this, the law is national, how is it enforced locally? Right, and how it's prioritized depends on different authority, local authority. And it also then it depends right down to the discretion of each different officer of that local authority, how they view things on their day, right? That is the reality. That is the reality of things. And once you're coming for one thing, right, then that opens up the whole can of worms for the others, right? So it's not. So don't think that it's just the one thing that they will turn around and kind of get you on, right? Because they have a new duty. The houses your property has to be free. It is mandatory that they're free of category 2 hazards. So category 1 hazard and category 2 hazards is discretionary. So mistake number 10, they'll just give me an improvement notice, right, first. Not anymore. That assumption belonged to a period when councils didn't have the resources. So before the 27th of December, they didn't have the resources, right, to move straight to enforcement. Right, so you can find this all on the government's website. It's explicit that initial or minor non-compliance still carries a civil penalty. Being classified as minor, right, changes the fine ban but it doesn't mean no fine. And a local authority now is now able to retain the revenue from the penalties that they issue, which is the direct incentive that did exist before. And plus, the government's turned around and said they placed a new duty on them. There's civil penalties. So the reason why improvement notices were given before was because you only had 1 or 2 people, right, in a local authority, right? So now, right, £60 million has been given, right, to local authorities. So with the larger local authorities, right, so how it's been kind of divided out there, with the larger ones, right, which are kind of more in need of it, right, so that's like £1 million, right, for like some of them, right. So £1 million, and think about this, right, so enforcement officers, what, £35,000, £40,000, right, so now where they only had 1 officer, right, previously, or 1 or 2 officers, right, now they could employ, right, like, what's that, £350,000, like, employs you, like, 10 officers, right, 700, right, 700, so you could, about 30 officers, now 30 officers in the local authorities now, right, so just, and plus they can retain the revenue from fines and penalties, so 1 officer's fees, right, for salary, for the year, equals one penalty, right, to a landlord and agent. And it's most likely a lot of the times, plus we've seen this on the internet. So enforcement is going to increase, not decrease. But what's the incentive behind it? Because there's a new duty. The government's placed a new duty, right, on them, onto the local authority. Plus they can retain revenue, which is achieved from there. So with the financial severity, the financial pressures that local authorities are under. So this is a way of raising revenue, and it's civil penalties. You don't need to go to court anymore. So that they'll give me improvement notice, right? That error has gone, right? But if you protect yourself, get yourself protected. If you get yourself a category 1 and category 2 risk assessment survey done, right? So then we can show you how you can protect yourself, right? So you do not get initial or minor fines, as it's written on there. Right, so please do connect with us when we kind of go for this. Right, now, common costly mistake, right, number 11. This is social housing issue. It doesn't apply to me. It never was. The Housing Act 2004 hazard framework applies to every private exactly the same way it applies to social housing. So there's no separate or softer standard for private landlords. Right. So this is where what the Renters' Right Act opened up. So they didn't have the investigative powers before. They didn't have the enforcement powers before. Right? But that's why you kind of got away with things. What you got away with what before, you will not be able to get away with now. But as enforcement teams get bigger and they start getting more revenue, enforcement will eventually, if you do not stay compliant, it will catch up with you. Right. So mistake number 12, they haven't got the resources to actually come after me. As I mentioned earlier, that was the gap. That was before. Right. £60 million has been dedicated to enforcement funding and a statutory duty to enforce rather than discretionary powers. The resources excuse that protected landlords for years no longer applies. So with that duty, right? So mistake number 13. Sorry, obviously, you can book in the free consultation where we'll give you more information on this, right? And because of the time, I've got to kind of whiz through this, right? So mistake number 30, it's minor first offence, then they let it go, just waive it. Civil penalties no longer need to go through court to be issued. Minor or initial changes, which penalty ban you land in, it does not mean no penalty. There is no automatic waiver for a first offence. So basically what that means in plain English, right, even if it's a first time, or it doesn't matter how minor it is, or if it's a first time offence, right, it's down to the discretion of the officer. If they want to fine you, if they've got a reason to fine you, they can. It's down to their discretion. And how will your legal team, how can the head office defend you against that? The civil penalties. If they say that risk is inside there, and they take the evidence, the pictures of that, you can't. So is prevention not better than the cure? Mistake number 14. My tenants don't know enough to make this a problem. That gap again is closing whether you act or not, and it's closing from multiple directions at once. Tenants are being educated, as I said before, by knowing of his listers, actively pursuing disrepair compensation claims by disrepair teams, like by social media, by word of mouth from friends who already have made a claim, by citizen advice, by the property, by suing the property ombudsman, by different local authority departments themselves. Your tenant does not need to be an expert. They just need to know one route in. And now what with AI? Right, it's very easy. They don't even have to go to these departments, right? So right now there are several points, several pointing straight at you. Repayment orders up to 24 months, fines and penalties for enforcement officers, disrepair claims, other penalties, for there's so many different penalties and fines that you can get, for harassment, discrimination, etc., and claims for distress and losses stacking up. So these, you can have multiple claims, multiple fines and penalties going at the same time. And mistake number 15, I've been compliant for years, so I still am. Not being caught out before isn't the same as having been compliant. Because they couldn't prove it, they didn't have the resources. You got away with it. It's as simple as that, right? And so now they can prove it. It says on the government's website, to build cases, to give a new investigatory powers, to build cases, a new duty, and to make it easier to obtain whatever information what they need. Whether it's bank statements, to third parties as well. They can enter business premises, right? They can enter residential premises, It's basically they've got the net. They've kind of got you snookered. They've got you checkmated, right? And that way. So mistake number 16. It's a new build, so none of this really applies to me. It's another one I'm having. This is true only for a genuine new build. Right, would be true for a genuine new build, most likely. Once a property is roughly 10 years old, it carries the same risk profile as any older property. Age catches up, with things with it, regardless of how it started out, and regardless of how it cosmetically looks. Right. So remember, this is where the category 2 hazards. It's really, really kind of difficult, and that's discretionary. So mistake number 17, Section 21 being scrapped doesn't really change anything for me. It already has, right? Issues that used to just quietly disappear because you could end there. So before, tenants, they were scared. They were scared to mention things or whatever now about rent increases, or repairs issues, that because they thought, okay, look, you know what, I could get evicted, no fault eviction, Section 21. With that now gone, they're coming out the woodwork. they're coming hard. So when they go on the internet, and there's so much information, and then they go to AI, right? Then it says, look, go to no win no fee solicitor, go to disrepair claims or whatever that, right? Well, and these guys are coaching them. Right? They're training them, right? For what to come after you. Right, to seek right, a major compensation. Think about this a second now. 24-month right, rent repayment order. If your property is like £1,000, that's £24,000. If it's £3,000, that's £2,000. Right. So from 24 to £2,000, you got to pay back in rent. Can you do that? Can you afford to do that? How would that impact on you and your business, right? And your property? So mistake number 18, I'll just sell up before it becomes a problem. An open disrepair claim or a live rent repair order can delay or block a sale outright. Selling isn't the exit from liability that already exists on the property, right? So I hear this all the time. Landlords are looking to exit the market, right? And again, you've got to be making sure that you do it the right way. You don't know it becomes unlawful eviction, right? Whatever, and so these can be kind of blocked. It just opens things up. So before you even get through, if you think of selling property, okay, because it's too much headache or whatever, so I'm not stopping you from doing that. I'm not advising you against that, but you still gonna need to do. It's best to get a risk assessment, Category 1, Category 2 risk assessment survey done. But before that, get yourself coached. Trust me, right? If people say to me, why should I get myself trained up? Why should I get myself coached? Why should I get training? Or why should I kind of do this? Right? If I'm going to sell my property, because the thing is, the moment, right? The moment you turn around, you notice to a tenant. That's when the problems start. That's when this repair claims, they become invented. They become kind of they start kind of doing things. They start exaggerating things. Right? Why? To delay, right? To delay the eviction process. Right? Now think about it a second, right? For them to move, they're going to need a month deposit, month advance rent, right? And then plus have to pay you the last month's rent, right? So let's say that's probably £2,500 a month. That's £7,500. Right, that they need there. Then put another £2,000, right, for removals and costs and anything else you may have to buy. How many people got about £9,000-10,000 sitting in their bank account, right, just to move, right? And then the emotional, that stress of having to uproot and everything. So when they want to go on their terms, that's different. But when you're telling them, this just opens up whole. This is when we see relationships break down. So we also provide a no contest tenant eviction service. So inquire about that, right? As well, because that becomes we do handle things very, very sensitively, right? So so the way you handle the evictions, it needs to be done sensitively. And again, so if you do sell out, money in the bank, right, with you're going to get charged capital gains tax, right, most likely, right, then money in the bank, right, with right, over a period of time with inflation and everything, right, it's not going to hold the same value, right. At least money in bricks and mortar, right, it will appreciate in value, right, and then plus also, well, when you got money in the bank, you end up spending on things that you don't actually need all of a sudden, right, and so that money's just kind of gone, right. Now, mistake number 19, right, this is unfair. I just providing a property. Under the Homes Fitness for Human Habitation Act, providing a rental property carries a legal duty, not just a right to collect rent. And agents inside the management chain share that duty alongside the landlord, right? So now, so if you're thinking, oh, this is unfair, why are they doing this to me? Now, you're running a business. So your property, why is it important? Why should I have a Category 1, Category 2 risk assessment survey done? Well, because these are Category 1, Category 2 risk hazards. Right. So as I said before, an incident does not have to take place. Harm doesn't have to come to tenant in order for them to fine you. And now fines now come through, right? From many different directions, right? Now, so your property. So if you're given a property which has got hazards, especially Category 1 hazards, which are mandatory, yeah? So this is where it triggers off the rent repayment orders and disrepair claims, yeah? And then this is where they start lying if you haven't got proper recording system. So we've got a CRM, right, proper CRM, right, for landlords and agents, right, which has also, they specialise with Category 1 and Category 2 risk assessment, right, tools and whatever ability in there, right, now. So we'll also discuss that later on as well. So this is why Right? So if you could be a good person, but if you have not covered the 170, 168 compliance checks that the NRLA like talking about, but no one knows his solicitors and even enforcement officers can also kind of use upon that against you. Tenants can use that upon against you, right? And it just opens up a whole web of things. So this is why, yes, you can discover these things on the internet and through AI, right? But how it relates to inside your property, right? Because we are HHSRS trained, and because we're also NRLA Renters' Right Act trained, right? So, and we deal with local authority enforcement officers and housing inspectors on a daily basis. So we know what they're looking for, and especially we have our relationships with them, right? So your head office, legal team, AI cannot tell you that, but we can tell you. We can help minimize the risk, massively. Right. So mistake number 20, it has to start with it has to start with a tenant complaint. You don't need a tenant complaint anymore. Right. Local authority can act on their own initiative. Right. And I think I mentioned this earlier in the video, right? Each one sets it because each local authority sets its own enforcement policies, and priorities. So there's no single national trigger everyone is waiting on, right? So I'm hearing some local authorities where their enforcement policies, okay, we're gonna go to letting agents in our area, but knowing that they can ask the questions like, are all your properties for you? Have you done risk assessment on your properties? Are there for your category 1, category 2 hazards? And every time I go to a letting agent, people don't know. The staff don't know. The fact that anyone don't know raises suspicion. Then they ask you to see your records. If you refuse, they can come back within 24 hours, right? And if they're really suspicious, they could seize your equipment there and then. It's there on the government's website. I'm not making any of this up, right? And then it's others also, they could decide. Okay, I've heard also where they're going around, knocking on certain streets, right? Hi, are you okay? Is your property in good repair? Whatever, they show their ID, whatever that. Oh no, it's not. Okay, do you mind? They show the ID. Do you mind if we could just come and have a look? We're from the local council, whatever this, that way, blah blah. Oh, okay, you come in. That's it. But you're trapped there, and the fact that you have not been proactive. Now all of a sudden, and those ones which are coming proactively like that. Think about it. What they're doing it for? It is to because the duty is placed on there. So do you think so? They're just going to turn around and just give you improvement notice and go away? They're not going to give up the opportunity of finding you, right? And if I can't afford it, that's why they can look at bank records as well, or whatever that, and it's tough. It's tough, and you could turn around. Oh, it's my agent, it's my landlord. So that's why they got the new investigative powers. So what proportion, or whether it is with the landlord one side or both sides, right? That way. So things have changed massively, right? So mistake number 2. So finally, mistake number 2. And not even no one even knows my properties are rentals. Some enforcement teams proactively, specifically to find cases like this. Again, I've just mentioned door-to-door visits, and that way, so you won't get away with it. So there's so many different ways which are there. Now, so basically, I have kind of gone through landlords agents, 50 things that you need to know. If you found this video helpful, don't stop here. This video only scratches the surface, so I strongly recommend that you now watch our full presentation. Landlords and letting agents, 50 things you need to know how to protect yourself against £40,000 fines, 24-month rent repayment orders of up to £72,000 plus, disrepair claims, and biggest compliance risks facing the private rental sector in your homes that you didn't know existed. Yes, it is longer, but it could be one of the most valuable 20 minutes so that you will invest in protecting yourself. And I believe in that video, if I remember correctly, it goes through 13 super rights that tenants have, 13 superpowers that have been given to local authorities since 27th December, right? And again, we've gone through the common costly mistakes, so you could skip that part on the timestamp, right? So this is not a small change. This is massive. So in my professional opinion, it's the biggest change for the private rented sector that I have seen in my lifetime. So in that presentation, I'll explain where your biggest risks really are, why those risks are inside your properties and not outside them, why certificates alone do not prove that the property is safe, why category 1 and category 2 hazards matter, why an accident does not have to happen before enforcement action begins, why landlords and agents are now both under greater scrutiny, how tenants are being educated and coached by no-win no-fee solicitors and claims organisations, and most importantly, what practical action you should take. Right. So quite a bit of the stuff I have, some of the stuff I've covered here, so may overlap here, right, but it's still going to be useful information. So step number one, I encourage you to book your free 30-minute consultation. Don't wait to watch the video presentation before booking your free 30-minute consultation, as we are getting inundated with bookings. We are limiting the number of people per consultation. Landlord and agent consultations are separate, but landlords and agents are booked together in small limited groups, as most have the same questions, and so you can email them a personal question to us that will be answered anonymously. By watching the presentation, I'm almost certain that you will have questions. So when you book on the consultation, book it and then make sure you watch it beforehand and just email us your questions. Okay. Step number two, become a free Angel Moves member. Membership is completely free, and it gives you access to far more than just general legislative updates. Most organisations simply tell you what changed, what changed the law, right? So, and as I also mentioned earlier, yes, your head office legal team and AR can tell you what the national law is, but we make it our business to know what enforcement policies your local authorities are prioritising, and local authorities which are not national news. So all local authorities have, as we said, all local authorities have a new duty to enforce compliance laws and practices, but how aggressive they do it and which new policies the actual local authority brings in your area, right, aggressively, right, your lawyer, head office, and AR can't tell you. We can bring this to you before it happens, as we keep our ears close to the ground, as we are informed by the local authority relations we have built over the years, placing tenants from emergency and temporary accommodation into private sector homes. So we have a vested interest to protect the landlord agents in our existing network, as we bring that same service to you. So our aim is to help you understand what those changes mean in practice. So through our work with local authorities, housing professionals, landlords and letting agents, and others across the private rental sector, we continually build our relationships of how the sector is changing and where the practical risks are emerging. That means our members receive practical information designed to help them stay ahead of problems, not simply react after they occur. So as a member, you'll receive updates, guidance, educational resources, invitations to webinars, practical compliance information, and news about the services and support available through Angel Moves. As our relationships and work across the sector continue to grow, our aim is to bring members even more practical insight and support to help them navigate to an increasingly complex private rented sector. So free membership is only the beginning. For landlords and agents who want a greater level of protection and support, our paid membership starts from just £15. So depending on the membership level you choose, you can get access to additional training at discounted rates, special support, compliance resources, bespoke systems, and a range of member-only benefits designed to help protect your properties, your business, and your income. Considering the potential financial consequences of enforcement action, legal disputes, and rent repayment orders or disrepair claims, many landlords and agents see membership as a small investment in protecting themselves against much larger risks. So whether you choose our free membership or one of our paid member options, our objective is the same: to help you identify risk early, understand your responsibilities more clearly, and put practical systems in place before small problems become expensive ones. So don't wait until you're facing an investigation, a compliant or legal claim. Join Angel Moves today and stay connected to the information, guidance, and support that could make a real difference tomorrow. So number 3, book your Category 1 and Category 2 risk assessment. If you haven't already done so, I strongly recommend booking your Category 1, Category 2 risk assessments. Right? Remember, your biggest risk is not usually outside your property, it's inside it. So the earlier hazards are identified, the easier and usually cheaper, but they are to deal with. So prevention is always better than trying to defend an enforcement investigation or legal claim later. So step number 4, make sure you book your landlord or agent training. If you're serious about protecting yourself and your business, your property, book onto one of our landlords or letting agent training programs. Many landlords and agents still rely on the knowledge that worked several years ago. The sector's changed, right? Tenants are becoming a better informed. Enforcement expectations are changing. The cost of getting it wrong is significant, right? And our member prices currently available and places are limited, right? So if you prefer individual one-to-one training rather than group training, speak to us during your consultation or in person, and we'll discuss the options available and see what we can do. Finally, please take the time to explore the rest of our Angel Moves website. There are videos, guidance, and resources throughout the site that have been designed to help you understand the bigger picture. This isn't simply about just passing a compliance check, it's about protecting your property, your business, your future. The people who act early usually have the most options. The people who wait until enforcement begins usually have the fewest. So don't delay. Watch the full 50 things you need to know presentation. Book your free 30-minute consultation. Become a free Angel Moves member. Book your Category 1 and Category 2 hazard risk assessment once they are at the prices that they're at. Right? And those prices can change from week to week. And if you haven't already, secure your place on our landlord and letting agent training program while the current member prices are being paid. We look forward to speaking to you soon. The risk isn't always the new law. Often it's the existing law. Nobody ever properly checked that is inside your property. So book your free 30-minute consultation today. No cost, no pressure. Bring your questions and we'll go through what generally applies to you.